Hey everyone, welcome back to Daily Native English.
Today we're talking about something that might be secretly holding you back: passive learning.
Yeah, have you ever spent hours studying, but then you forget everything the next day?
That's the worst. And the thing is, a lot of us don't even realize we're learning the wrong way.
Exactly. So today, we'll explain what passive learning is, why it doesn't work, and how you can fix it.
And trust me, once you switch to active learning, your progress will skyrocket.
So stick with us. We've got some super practical tips that'll save you time and help you remember things better.
All right, let's start with the basics. What exactly is passive learning?
It's when you're learning in a way that takes very little mental effort. And because of that, you don't actually retain much. Your brain isn't really working to store the information.
Yeah, passive learning is like watching a fitness video and thinking, you may think like, wow, I totally understand this workout. But if you never actually do the exercises, your muscles don't get stronger.
That's a great way to put it. You feel like you're learning, but in reality, nothing is sticking because your brain isn't engaging deeply.
And so many people fall into passive learning habits without even realizing it. I know I used to.
Oh, same here. What's one passive habit you used to do?
Definitely rewriting notes word for word. I used to rewrite my entire notebook, thinking it would help me remember. But in reality, I was just copying, not understanding.
Yep, I did that too. It feels productive because you're physically writing, but your brain is just going through the motions. It's like tracing a picture instead of actually drawing one from memory.
That's a good way to put it. Another big one is rereading the same material over and over. It makes you feel familiar with the topic, but when you try to recall it later, your mind goes blank.
Right. That's because familiarity isn't the same as understanding. Just because something looks familiar doesn't mean you can actually explain it.
So, why does passive learning feel like it's working when it's not?
Well, our brains love easy tasks. When something feels easy, like rereading a textbook or highlighting sentences, it gives us a false sense of confidence. But real learning happens when our brains actually have to work to process information.
Exactly. If you're not struggling at least a little bit, you're probably not learning. That's why active learning is so much better. It forces your brain to engage.
And don't worry, we're going to show you exactly how to make your learning more active so you can actually remember what you study.
All right, so we've talked about passive learning and why it doesn't work. But let's dig a little deeper. Why does active learning actually help you remember things better?
It all comes down to something called cognitive load. Basically, it's the amount of mental effort your brain needs to process and store new information.
So, if learning feels too easy, your cognitive load is low, and
That means your brain isn't working hard enough to really remember anything. But if learning feels challenging, not overwhelming, but just difficult enough, your brain has to engage, and that helps you retain information.
that's why active learning is so much better. The more your brain works to organize and process information, the more likely you are to actually remember it.
Exactly. Think of it like exercising. If you lift super light weights that don't challenge your muscles, you won't get stronger. But if you lift something a little heavier, your muscles work harder and grow.
I love that comparison. So basically, active learning equals higher cognitive load equals better retention.
Yep. And let's look at some examples. Say you're studying from a textbook. If you just highlight sentences, that's passive. It feels like you're doing something, but your brain isn't really processing the info.
But if you take those key points and turn them into a mind map, drawing connections between ideas, now your brain has to actually think about how everything fits together. That's active learning.
Exactly. You're not just absorbing information, you're working with it, which makes it stick.
So the key takeaway? If something feels too easy, it's probably not helping you learn. You need to challenge your brain just enough to make it work. So now that we know why passive learning doesn't work, let's talk about how to spot it in your own study routine.
Yeah, because sometimes we think we're learning, but we're actually just going through the motions.
One big sign is if your study session feels boring or too easy. Like, if you're just sitting there rereading notes, but nothing really challenges your brain.
Or if you're copying stuff word for word without actually processing it. That's a classic passive learning habit.
Yep. And here's a simple way to check. While studying, stop and ask yourself, do I actually understand this? Or am I just repeating words?
Ooh, that's a good test. Another clue, if you forget most of what you studied a few hours later, that's a sign you weren't engaging with the material enough.
Right. If you can't explain it in your own words without looking at your notes, that's a red flag.
So basically, if your brain isn't working, it's probably not learning. The goal isn't just to go through the material, it's to actually interact with it.
Exactly. So next time you study, check in with yourself. Am I really thinking? Or am I just staring at words on a page?
So, now that we know passive learning isn't the best, how can we actually switch to active learning? Let's dive into some simple yet effective strategies.
First up, summarizing instead of copying. Instead of just rewriting your notes word for word, try putting what you learned into your own words.
Exactly. When you rewrite information in your own words, your brain has to process the ideas more deeply. It forces you to understand the material instead of just copying it mindlessly.
Think about it like explaining a topic to a friend. If you can explain it clearly, then you really get it.
Yep, that's why another great technique is to teach what you learn. When you teach someone else, you're forced to really understand and organize your thoughts.
And you don't need a class to teach. You can explain the material to a friend, family member, or even just to yourself out loud.
A perfect example. If you're studying history, explain a historical event to someone else as if they've never heard of it. This helps you connect the dots and remember it better.
Another great method is to create visual maps and charts. This is especially helpful when you're dealing with complex ideas or topics.
Yes, you can take key points and turn them into a mind map, diagram, or flowchart. This helps link concepts together instead of just memorizing isolated facts.
Exactly. And visually organizing information can make things clearer. For example, when studying English grammar, create a chart of tenses and their rules. It'll help you see the patterns and connections.
Definitely. And here's a little self-assessment tip. After you've studied, ask yourself, can I explain this without looking at my notes?
Great test. If you can explain it easily, then you're probably on the right track with active learning. If not, it's a sign you might need to engage a bit more with the material.
And remember, the key is to make your brain work, not just passively absorb. Whether you summarize, create visuals, or teach, these techniques will make learning more effective and rewarding.
Absolutely. So, next time you study, try one of these active learning methods and see how much more you remember.
So, let's talk about the biggest benefit of switching to active learning. It's not just about learning better, it's about learning faster and more efficiently.
Right? Because when you're actively engaging with the material, you're not just memorizing. You're making connections and understanding things on a deeper level.
Exactly. And by cutting out passive learning habits, you can actually cut your study time without losing progress. You'll retain more in less time.
And that's something everyone wants, right? Less time spent studying, but more knowledge sticking in your brain.
For sure. It's all about making those study sessions count. If you're actively learning, you'll be amazed at how much more you remember.
And here's the challenge for you, listeners. Pick one active learning method today, whether it's summarizing, creating a mind map, or teaching someone else, and see the difference for yourself.
Yeah, just one method can make a huge difference. So test it out and see how much faster you can learn when you're fully engaged.
Before we wrap up, let's do a quick recap. Passive learning wastes time. But when you switch to active learning, you'll boost your retention and cut down your study time.
Absolutely. So take the challenge, test your study habits, and try more active techniques. Let us know how it goes.
We can't wait to hear how much more efficient your study sessions are once you start using active learning. Keep at it, and you'll see real progress.
Thanks for tuning in to today's episode of Daily Native English. We'll catch you next time with more tips to help you learn English the smart way.
Bye, everyone. Happy studying.